first ships appeared on Tuesday morning at exactly 0947 Earth Standard Time. They came not as dots of light in the distance, but as massive shadows that blocked out entire sections of the sky. The people of Earth looked up and saw darkness where the sun should have been shining. Dr. Sarah Chen was drinking her morning coffee at the Global Space Monitoring Station when every alarm in the building started screaming at once. Her coffee mug hit the floor and shattered as she ran to the main display screen. What she saw there made her heart stop beating for a moment. 12 enormous ships hung in space just beyond Earth's moon. Each one was the size of a city, their dark metal hulls covered in strange markings that seemed to glow with their own light. Behind these massive vessels, hundreds of smaller ships spread out like a net around the entire planet. "How many?" Sarah asked the technician next to her. "We count over 3,000 ships total," the young man replied, his voice shaking. They just appeared out of nowhere. No warning, no sensor readings, nothing. Around the world, every major government received the same message at the same time. It came through every radio, every television broadcast, every internet connection, and every cell phone on the planet. The voice that spoke was deep and cold, with words that sounded like they were being ground between stones. "People of Earth," the voice began, "I am Admiral Vexthal of the hegemony of Zethkai. Your small world has been chosen to join our great empire. For 10,000 years, we have brought order to the galaxy. We have united over 600 worlds under our wise rule. In the emergency command center deep beneath the Swiss mountains, President Martinez of the United Earth Defense Council listened with growing anger. Around the table sat the leaders of every major nation on Earth. Their faces were pale, but their eyes showed determination rather than fear. "We offer you the same choice we have offered every species we have encountered," Admiral Vexthal continued. "Surrender your weapons, disband your military forces, accept our governors to rule over you. In return, you will have peace, you will have order, you will have our protection." General Harrison, the head of Earth's combined military forces, slammed his fist on the table. "Protection from what?" he growled. "From them?" the alien voice continued, as if it could hear his question. "Some species have chosen to resist us. They believed their primitive weapons could stand against the might of the hegemony. Those species no longer exist. Their worlds are empty now. Their cities are ash. Their people are forgotten." On the main screen in the command center, satellite images showed the alien fleet in all its terrible glory. The largest ship was positioned directly above North America. Its shadow covered half the continent. Smaller ships hung over every major city on Earth, like dark clouds waiting to bring storm. "However," Admiral Vexthal said, "we are not without mercy. We understand that primitive species need time to accept their new reality. We will give you 72 of your hours to consider our generous offer. Use this time wisely, speak with your leaders, look at our fleet. Understand that resistance is impossible." President Martinez stood up slowly. Every person in the room was looking at him, waiting for his response. He walked to the communication panel and pressed the button that would broadcast his words to the alien fleet above. "Admiral Vexthal," he said in a calm, steady voice, "we have heard your offer. We have seen your ships. We understand exactly what you are asking us to do." The command center was completely silent. Outside, the entire world held its breath. "Say decline," President Martinez said simply. For a long moment there was no response from the alien fleet. Then Admiral Vexthal's voice returned, but now it sounded confused rather than commanding. "Perhaps you did not understand," the alien said. "We are offering you the chance to live, to serve, to continue existing as a species. Your refusal means death for every human being on your planet." "We understood perfectly," General Harrison said, taking the microphone from the president. "Our answer is still no." "Impossible," Admiral Vexthal replied. "No species has ever refused our offer after seeing our fleet. You must be in shock. You need more time to think clearly." Dr. Elizabeth Kane, Earth's top xenobiologist, leaned forward to speak into the microphone. "Admiral, we appreciate that you find our response surprising, but humans have a saying: we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees." Above the Earth, Admiral Vexthal stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, staring at the blue and green world below. In his 300 years of service to the hegemony, He had conquered 47 worlds. Never had he encountered a species that refused to surrender after seeing the true size of their fleet. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "perhaps they are bluffing. Many species claim they will fight to the death, but they always surrender when the bombardment begins." Admiral Vexthal touched the scar on his neck, a mark he had earned in the last true battle the hegemony had fought. That was over 50 years ago, against a species that had actually tried to resist. They had lasted 6 hours. "Perhaps," he said, "but something feels different about these humans. Have you read their history files?" The tactical officer nodded. "Violent species, sir. They fight wars among themselves constantly, but their technology is primitive. Their weapons are crude. Their ships cannot even leave their own solar system. Yet they built a united government when they detected our approach," Admiral Vexthal mused. "They created a planetary defense council in less than a year. That shows unusual cooperation for a species that fights among itself." On Earth, the next 72 hours passed like a strange dream. The alien ships hung motionless above the planet, neither attacking nor communicating. The people of Earth went about their daily lives under the shadow of those enormous vessels, but in secret facilities around the world, other things were happening. Deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, engineers were working around the clock on projects that had been classified for decades. In hidden bases on the dark side of the moon, construction crews were putting the finishing touches on sleek black ships that had never been seen by civilian eyes. President Martinez visited one of these secret facilities on the second day. The underground complex stretched for miles in every direction, filled with machines and computers that hummed with barely contained energy. "How long have you been working on this?" he asked Colonel Stevens, the project director. "Officially, this project doesn't exist," Colonel Stevens replied with a tired smile. "Unofficially, we started building the first prototypes 30 years ago, after we recovered that crashed probe near Roswell." 30 years, the president repeated. "You've been preparing for this day for 30 years?" "Sir, humanity has been preparing for this day since we first looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone," the colonel said. "We just got serious about it when we realized the answer was no." The president walked through the facility, looking at the rows of sleek black vessels that filled the massive underground hangars. Each ship was about the size of a large airplane, but their hulls seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. They looked like pieces of space itself had been carved into the shape of weapons. "How many?" he asked. "This facility has 500 completed vessels," Colonel Stevens said. "We have 12 facilities like this one, plus the lunar construction yards, the asteroid mining platforms, and the deep space assembly stations." The president stopped walking. "Deep space assembly stations? How long have we had bases outside the solar system?" Colonel Stevens smiled again. "Sir, when we decoded that first alien data core, we learned how to build jump drives. We've had ships exploring nearby star systems for 15 years. We've been very busy." On the third day, Admiral Vexthal sent one final message to Earth. His voice was colder than before, with an edge of anger that hadn't been there previously. "Humans of Earth," he said, "your time is nearly ended. In 6 of your hours, we will begin the cleansing of your world. Your cities will burn. Your oceans will boil. Your species will be erased from the galaxy. This is your final chance to accept our mercy." In the underground command center, President Martinez looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. None of them looked afraid anymore. They looked ready. "All stations report ready," General Harrison said quietly. "The Black Armada is prepared for deployment. Lunar bases are online," reported Admiral Chen. "Our deep space assets are in position. Jump drives are charged and ready," added Colonel Stevens through the video link. "All ships are waiting for your command, sir." President Martinez took the microphone one last time. When he spoke, his voice was calm and confident. "Admiral Vexthal," he said, "we have heard your final warning. We want you to know that we appreciate the opportunity you have given us. These last 3 days have been very useful." "Useful for what?" the alien admiral asked, confusion clear in his voice. "For getting into position," President Martinez replied. "You see, Admiral, you made one very important mistake. You assumed that because we are young and our technology looks primitive, we would be easy to defeat. You never considered that we might have been hiding our true capabilities. Above Earth, Admiral Vextool felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" he demanded. "I mean, Admiral, that Earth's refusal to surrender was not an act of desperation," the President said. "It was an act of war. And now that you have given us time to prepare, we are ready to show you exactly what humanity is capable of when threatened." On every human ship in the secret fleet, crews were strapping themselves into their seats and running final system checks. In command centers around the world, officers were watching displays that showed thousands of contacts moving into attack positions. "Admiral Vextool," President Martinez said, "you came here to demand that Earth kneel before your empire. Instead, you are about to learn why that was the worst mistake your people have ever made." The alien admiral's voice came back one final time, but now it carried a note of uncertainty that had not been there before. "You cannot possibly believe that your primitive world can stand against the might of the hegemony." "We are about to find out," President Martinez replied. Then he turned to General Harrison and gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. "General," he said quietly, "release the Black Armada." The first sign that something was wrong came from the hegemony's sensor officer. Lieutenant Creethall had been monitoring Earth's surface for any signs of military buildup or panic. For 3 days, she had watched the humans go about their normal activities with a calm that disturbed her. "Admiral," she said, turning from her console with confusion written across her scaled features, "I am detecting massive energy readings from beneath the planet's surface." Admiral Vextool approached her station, his heavy footsteps echoing on the metal deck. "Show me." The main display screen lit up with a 3-dimensional map of Earth. Dozens of red dots pulsed beneath the continents, each one indicating a massive power source that had not been there the day before. "When did these appear?" the Admiral asked. "That is the strange part, sir," Lieutenant Creethall replied. "They did not appear. They were always there. Our sensors simply could not detect them until now." "Impossible. Our scanning technology can penetrate any known shielding." "Yes, sir. That is what makes this so disturbing." Admiral Vextool studied the display with growing unease. In his centuries of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The humans had hidden massive installations from the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. How is that possible? Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Colonel Stevens stood in the main control room of Project Dark Sky. Around him, hundreds of technicians worked at computers that controlled the most secret military program in human history. The walls of the command center were lined with screens showing the alien fleet above and the deployment status of Earth's hidden forces. "Stealth fields are holding steady," reported Major Kim from her station. "The aliens still cannot get accurate readings on our ship numbers or locations." "Excellent," Colonel Stevens replied. "How many vessels do we have ready for immediate deployment?" "All 12 primary facilities are reporting full readiness," answered Captain Rodriguez. "That gives us 6,000 combat vessels in the first wave. The lunar construction yards have another 3,000 ships ready, and our deep space assets are moving into position now." Colonel Stevens allowed himself a small smile. 30 years of preparation were about to be put to the test. The human race had spent 3 decades building in secret, using technology recovered from crashed alien probes, and combining it with uniquely human innovations in warfare and tactics. The project had begun in the 1990s, when a damaged alien scout ship had crashed in the Nevada desert. Unlike the popular stories, the government had not hidden this from the public out of fear of panic. They had hidden it because they immediately understood what it meant. Earth was not alone in the universe, and the beings out there had technology far beyond human capabilities. Rather than wait for first contact, humanity's leaders had made a different choice. They had decided to prepare. The crash site had yielded incredible treasures. The alien ship's computer contained star maps, technical specifications, and most importantly, detailed files on something called the hegemony of Zethkai. The humans learned that they lived in a galaxy ruled by an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. They learned that this empire gave each new species the same choice: surrender or die. But the humans also learned something the aliens had not expected them to discover. The hegemony's files contained detailed records of every species they had conquered, including their military capabilities, their technologies, and their weaknesses. More importantly, they contained records of the few species that had tried to resist. All of those species had failed, But their failures had taught the humans valuable lessons. The records showed that every resistant species had made the same mistake. They had tried to fight the hegemony using traditional military tactics. They had built bigger ships and more powerful weapons. They had tried to meet force with force. They had all been destroyed. The humans decided to try a different approach. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been one of the lead scientists on the early research team. Now, 30 years later, she stood in the launch bay of Lunar Base Armstrong, watching the final preparations for humanity's first real test in space warfare. "The psychological warfare protocols are loaded and ready," she reported to the launch commander. "Each ship's AI has been programmed with complete behavioral profiles of all known hegemony species." The launch commander, Admiral Reyes, nodded grimly. "And the swarm tactics? All pilots have been trained in the new combat doctrines," Dr. Mitchell replied. "They understand that this is not about individual heroics or honorable combat. This is about hunting in packs." Admiral Reyes looked out through the observation window at the rows of sleek black ships waiting in the launch bays. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering and alien technology. Their hulls were designed to absorb sensor beams and appear smaller than they actually were. Their engines were whisper quiet and produced almost no heat signature. Their weapons were built not for destruction, but for precision strikes that would disable rather than destroy. "Have you ever hunted wolves, Doctor?" Admiral Reyes asked. "No, sir. Why do you ask?" "Wolves don't try to overpower their prey through brute force," the Admiral explained. "They work together. They separate their target from the herd. They attack from multiple directions. They go for the legs first to slow their prey down. Then they go for the throat." Dr. Mitchell looked at the ships again with new understanding. "We are the wolves." "Yes," Admiral Reyes said quietly. "And the hegemony is about to learn what it feels like to be prey." Back on Earth, the countdown to the hegemony's ultimatum was entering its final hours. Admiral Vextool stood on his command bridge, watching the peaceful blue world below, with growing frustration. His sensors still could not get clear readings on whatever was hidden beneath the planet's surface. His communications officer had reported several strange interference patterns in their scanning beams, as if something was actively jamming their equipment. "Sir," his tactical officer approached carefully. "Perhaps we should begin a limited bombardment early. A demonstration of our power might convince the humans to surrender." Admiral Vextool considered this suggestion. In the past, showing overwhelming force had often broken the will of resistant species before a real battle could begin. But something about the humans' calm confidence worried him. "No," he decided. "We will honor our agreement. 72 hours as promised. But prepare all ships for immediate bombardment when the time expires." What Admiral Vexthal did not know was that human ships were already moving. Deep in space, far beyond the range of hegemony sensors, the first elements of Earth's secret fleet were taking their positions. These were not the ships hidden in underground facilities or lunar bases. These were vessels that had been built in secret shipyards, orbiting distant asteroids, powered by fusion reactors that had been operating in complete radio silence for over a decade. Captain Maria Santos commanded one of these deep space vessels, a sleek Predator-class ship called the Shadow Hunter. She and her crew had been living in the darkness between stars for 2 years, waiting for this moment. Her ship was one of 50 that had been positioned throughout the local star system, ready to cut off any hegemony retreat. "All stations report. Ready, Captain," her tactical officer announced quietly. "Jump drives are charged. Weapons are armed. Stealth systems are operating at maximum efficiency." Captain Santos looked at the display, showing the hegemony fleet clustered around Earth. The alien ships were positioned exactly as human strategists had predicted they would be. Arrogant and confident, showing their full strength like predators, displaying their power to frighten prey into submission. "Begin final approach," she ordered. "Silent running. No active sensors. No communications with other ships until the signal is given." Around Earth's solar system, 49 other ships, just like the Shadow Hunter, were making the same preparations. They moved like ghosts through space, their advanced stealth technology making them invisible to hegemony sensors. Each ship carried enough firepower to a hegemony cruiser, but more importantly, each ship carried weapons designed specifically to target alien technology, based on decades of studying recovered wreckage. The humans had learned that hegemony ships all used the same basic design principles. They relied on massive energy shields for protection and concentrated firepower for attack. Their ships were built like fortresses, designed to survive direct assault while delivering overwhelming destruction to their enemies. But fortresses had weaknesses that smaller, faster attackers could exploit. On Earth, General Harrison stood in the main war room, surrounded by displays showing the positions of every human and alien ship in the solar system. The room was filled with officers from every branch of Earth's military, all working together for the first time in human history. "Deep space assets report ready," announced Colonel Park from the communications station. "All 50 shadow ships are in position around the system perimeter. Lunar forces ready," added Admiral Chen. 3,000 ships prepared for immediate launch. "Underground facilities ready," reported Colonel Stevens. 6,000 ships ready for surface deployment. General Harrison looked at the clock on the wall. 2 hours remained until Admiral Vexthal's ultimatum expired. 2 hours until humanity would either prove itself capable of defending its freedom or prove that courage alone was not enough against superior technology. "Any word from our deep space monitoring stations?" he asked. "Yes, sir," replied Captain Thompson from the intelligence desk. "Long-range sensors have detected hegemony reinforcement fleets moving toward our position. It appears Admiral Vexthal called for backup after our refusal to surrender." "How many ships?" "Best estimate is another 5,000 vessels arriving in approximately 6 hours." General Harrison nodded calmly. The human planners had expected this. The hegemony would not risk a prolonged battle with an unknown enemy. They would try to end the fight quickly with overwhelming force. "Perfect," the general said, surprising everyone in the room. "The more ships they bring, the more targets we will have." In the depths of space, the hegemony reinforcement fleet was indeed approaching Earth at maximum speed. Fleet Admiral Thekvon commanded this second wave, having been ordered by the hegemony High Command to ensure that the human problem was resolved quickly and completely. Admiral Thekvon had received Admiral Vexthal's reports about the strange human behavior with disbelief. No primitive species had ever shown such confidence when faced with hegemony power. Either the humans were completely insane, or they had hidden capabilities that their primitive technology suggested they should not possess. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, "we are detecting unusual energy patterns throughout this star system. There appears to be some kind of advanced technology operating here that we cannot identify." "Explain," Admiral Thekvon ordered. "Sir, our long-range sensors show what appears to be a primitive solar system with one inhabited planet and basic spacefaring capabilities. But our detailed scans are detecting energy signatures that suggest much more advanced technology at work." Admiral Thekvon studied the sensor reports with growing concern. The energy patterns looked almost like hegemony technology, but there were differences that made no sense. How could a species that had never left its own solar system possess technology that rivaled the hegemony's own? "Time to arrival?" he asked. 4 hours, sir. Signal Admiral Vexthal. Tell him to wait for our arrival before beginning the bombardment. I want to see these humans for myself before we destroy them." Back on Earth, the final preparations were complete. In facilities around the world, human crews were climbing into ships that had never been tested in real combat. These men and women had trained for years on simulators and in secret exercises. But now they would face the most powerful military force in known galactic history. But they were not afraid. Every human pilot, every ship commander, every tactical officer knew exactly what they were fighting for. They were fighting for the right to remain free. They were fighting for the future of their species. They were fighting to prove that humanity would never kneel before any master, no matter how powerful. As the final hour approached, President Martinez made one last broadcast to the alien fleet above. "Admiral Vexthal," he said, his voice carrying clearly through space to the hegemony flagship. "Your time limit is almost reached. We want you to know that we have spent these last few days wisely. We have prepared for what comes next. Your preparations will not matter." Admiral Vexthal replied coldly. "No force in this galaxy can stand against the hegemony." "Perhaps you are right," President Martinez admitted. "But you are about to discover that humanity has never been very good at accepting the impossible." Admiral Vexthal checked his chronometer. 30 minutes remained until the bombardment would begin. Around Earth, his fleet moved into final attack positions. their massive weapons charging with enough power to turn the planet's surface into molten glass. But deep beneath that planet's surface, and in the darkness of space around it, humanity's Black Armada was ready to prove that sometimes the impossible was just another word for something that had never been tried before. The bombardment began exactly 72 hours after Admiral Vexthal's ultimatum. The first salvo came from the massive dreadnought hanging above North America, a beam of pure energy that could have vaporized a mountain. It struck Earth's planetary shield system with the force of a nuclear explosion and bounced off harmlessly. Admiral Vexthal stared at his tactical display in shock. The energy readings showed that Earth's shields had absorbed the full power of his flagship's main weapon without even flickering. That should have been impossible. No planetary defense system in the galaxy could withstand that much concentrated firepower. "Sir," his weapons officer reported with confusion in his voice, "our bombardment appears to have had no effect. The planetary shields are holding steady." "Impossible," Admiral Vexthal growled. "Fire full. Power from all ships." 3,000 hegemony vessels opened fire at once. The space around Earth lit up like a small sun as enough energy to destroy entire fleets hammered against the planet's fortes. For 10 full minutes, the alien fleet poured destruction toward the blue world below. The shields held. "How?" Admiral Vexthal whispered, his voice barely audible on the bridge. "How can a primitive species possess shields more powerful than our own?" His question was answered when space itself seemed to come alive around his fleet. The first human ships appeared without warning, materializing out of empty space, like ghosts becoming solid. They were smaller than hegemony vessels, sleek and dark, moving with impossible speed and grace. Admiral Vexthal's sensors, his tactical officer shouted. "Multiple vessels approaching from all vectors." "How many?" the Admiral demanded. I cannot get an accurate count, sir. They appear to be using some kind of sensor jamming technology. Best estimate is thousands of ships." Admiral Vexthal felt cold fear grip his heart as he watched the tactical display. Red dots were appearing everywhere around his fleet, moving in patterns he had never seen before. The human ships were not approaching in formation like civilized warriors. They were swarming like insects. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the lead element of the Black Armada's first assault wave. Her ship, the Nightwolf, was one of 600 vessels that had launched from the underground facilities beneath Earth's surface. As she watched her tactical display, she felt a predator's satisfaction at seeing the hegemony fleet clustered together like prey animals in a valley. "All ships, this is Pack Leader," she announced over the secure communication network. "Begin Hunt Protocol 7. Target engines and communication arrays only. Remember, we want them alive and helpless." The human ships spread out in a pattern that seemed random to alien eyes, but followed principles learned from studying pack hunters on Earth. Wolves, sharks, killer whales, even lions hunting in groups. All followed the same basic strategy: separate the prey, confuse them, attack from unexpected angles, and go for the weak points. The hegemony fleet tried to respond with traditional tactics. They formed defensive lines and concentrated their firepower on the approaching human vessels. Their massive weapons could have destroyed any ship in the galaxy with a single hit. But the human ships refused to fight fair. Admiral Reyes watched the battle from his command ship above the lunar surface, coordinating the attack through quantum communication links that the aliens could not intercept. The first phase was going exactly as planned. "Enemy fleet is maintaining defensive formation," reported his tactical officer. "They appear to be expecting a direct assault." "Perfect," Admiral Reyes replied. "Signal the second wave. Begin flanking maneuvers." From the hidden bases on Earth's moon, 3,000 more ships launched into space. But these vessels did not approach the alien fleet directly. Instead, they used micro-jump drives to appear at seemingly random locations throughout the battle zone. The hegemony fleet suddenly found itself surrounded by enemies that appeared and disappeared like shadows. The human ships would materialize long enough to fire a precise volley at a specific target, then vanish before the aliens could return fire. When the hegemony ships turned to face one group of attackers, another group would appear behind them. "This is not possible," Admiral Vexthal shouted at his bridge crew. "How can they coordinate so many vessels without communication networks we can detect?" His sensor officer looked up from her console with terror in her eyes. "Sir?" I think they are using quantum entanglement for communication. The signals are instantaneous and cannot be jammed or intercepted. Admiral Vexthul felt his confidence beginning to crumble. Quantum communication was theoretical even for the hegemony. How had these primitive humans mastered technology that his own scientists said was impossible? The answer was simple, though he would never learn it. Humanity had not invented quantum communication. They had stolen it from a crashed hegemony probe 15 years earlier, then improved it beyond anything the aliens had imagined possible. Captain Rodriguez piloted his ship, the Shadow Strike, through the chaos of battle with deadly precision. His target was a hegemony cruiser that was trying to coordinate the defense of a group of smaller vessels. Instead of attacking the cruiser's heavily armored hull, he focused on its communication arrays and sensor clusters. Target locked, his weapons officer announced. Precise strike package ready. Fire, Rodriguez ordered. The Shadow Strike's weapons were not designed to destroy enemy ships. They were designed to them. Focused particle beams sliced through the cruiser's external sensors like a surgeon's scalpel. Ion cannons overloaded the ship's communication systems without damaging the hull. Electromagnetic pulse warheads shut down non-essential systems while leaving life support intact. In 30 seconds, the hegemony cruiser was rendered blind, deaf, and helpless. But its crew was completely unharmed. Target neutralized, the weapons officer reported. Moving to next target. Across the battle zone, hundreds of similar attacks were taking place. The human ships struck with surgical precision, targeting exactly the systems needed to disable their enemies without killing them. It was a type of warfare the hegemony had never encountered before. Admiral Vexthul watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled around him. Ship after ship fell silent as their communications were severed and their sensors destroyed. Vessels that had been state-of-the-art warships minutes before were now floating helplessly in space, unable to see, hear, or fight back. All ships, he broadcast on the emergency frequency, break formation, scatter, and retreat to minimum safe distance. But when his fleet tried to retreat, they discovered the humans had prepared for that as well. Captain Santos and her deep space vessels had been waiting in the outer system for exactly this moment. As the hegemony ships tried to flee the main battle, they found their escape routes blocked by more of the mysterious human vessels. "This is impossible," Admiral Vexthul said again, but his voice was now barely a whisper. "How can they have ships everywhere? How did they know exactly where we would try to retreat?" The answer was that humanity had been studying hegemony tactics for 30 years. They knew exactly how the alien fleet would respond to every situation, because they had detailed records of every battle the hegemony had ever fought. The aliens had won so many easy victories that their tactics had become predictable. Dr. Mitchell watched the battle from the command center on Luna, coordinating the psychological warfare aspects of the attack. Each human ship was broadcasting carefully crafted messages designed to increase confusion and fear among the alien crews. "How are the enemy morale indicators?" she asked her assistant. "Exactly as predicted," came the reply. "Intercepted communications show growing panic among the hegemony crews. They have never faced an enemy that fights like this before." "Excellent. Begin Phase 3. Phase 3 was the most ruthless part of the human plan. Instead of continuing to attack the hegemony ships, the Black Armada simply stopped fighting and withdrew to a safe distance. They left the alien fleet floating helplessly in space, damaged but not destroyed, blind but not dead. The silence that followed was more terrifying to the hegemony crews than the battle had been. Admiral Vexthul sat in his command chair, staring at displays that showed nothing but static. Half his fleet was completely disabled. The other half was scattered throughout the system, afraid to regroup because they did not know where the human ships might be hiding. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through," the admiral ordered, though he dreaded what he might hear. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional, but carried an undertone of deadly seriousness that chilled Admiral Vexthul to his core. "Admiral Vexthul, this is Admiral Reyes of the Earth Defense Force. I believe you can see that your situation has changed significantly in the last few hours." Admiral Vexthul looked around his darkened bridge, then at the tactical displays showing his crippled fleet. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to understand something very important. Admiral Reyes replied. "This battle is not over. What you have just experienced was not our full strength. It was a demonstration. A demonstration of what? A demonstration of what happens when you threaten our world," Admiral Reyes said coldly. "You came here expecting us to surrender or die. Instead, you have learned that there is a third option. You can be defeated." Admiral Vexthal felt rage building inside him. "Impossible. The hegemony cannot be defeated by primitives. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. Admiral Reyes said, with what sounded almost like pity in his voice, "You have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years because you have never encountered a species like humanity. We don't fight like the others. We don't think like the others. And we sure as hell don't surrender like the others." On the main display of Admiral Vextal's ship, an image appeared that made his blood freeze. It showed the approaching hegemony reinforcement fleet, the 5,000 ships that were supposed to ensure his victory over the humans. But they were not alone in space. Surrounding the reinforcement fleet, barely visible against the darkness of deep space, were hundreds of human ships. The sleek black vessels moved like predators stalking prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "You see, Admiral?" Admiral Reyes continued. "While you were busy trying to destroy our planet, we were busy preparing surprises for your friends. Fleet Admiral Thekvan's reinforcements are going to receive the same lesson you just learned." Admiral Vextal stared at the display in disbelief. How had the humans known about the reinforcement fleet? How had they positioned ships to intercept them? How was any of this possible? "But I am going to offer you something your people have never offered any of the species you have conquered," Admiral Reyes said. "I am going to give you a choice. You can surrender your fleet and accept our terms for prisoner treatment, or you can continue this fight and discover exactly what the Black Armada can do when we stop holding back." "You are bluffing," Admiral Vextal said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No primitive species could defeat the combined might of the hegemony." Admiral Reyes replied quietly, "We are humans. We have been preparing for this war since before your empire knew we existed. We have studied every battle you have ever fought, analyzed every tactic you have ever used, and designed our entire military around defeating exactly the kind of enemy you represent." Admiral Vextal looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all staring at him with fear and confusion, waiting for him to make sense of the impossible situation they found themselves in. "What are your terms?" he asked finally. "Unconditional surrender of your fleet," Admiral Reyes replied immediately. "Your crews will be treated well, and eventually returned to hegemony space. Your ships will be examined and then destroyed, and you will carry a message back to your high command." "What message?" Admiral Reyes's voice became cold as space itself. "Tell them that Earth is not for conquest. Tell them that humanity has declared its independence from their empire. And tell them that if they ever threaten our world again, we will not stop at defending ourselves." Admiral Vextal felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature on his bridge. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Admiral, that this battle has taught us something very important about your empire. You are not as invincible as you pretend to be. You have grown soft from 10,000 years of easy victories. You have forgotten how to fight against an enemy that fights back." The display changed to show a star map of the local galactic region. Red dots marked dozens of hegemony-controlled worlds within 50 light-years of Earth. "We know where your worlds are," Admiral Reyes said quietly. "We know how you fight. We know your weaknesses. And now we have proven that we can defeat your fleets. The question you need to ask yourself is this. Do you really want to find out what happens when the Black Armada stops playing defense and starts playing offense?" Admiral Vextal stared at the star map, understanding dawning in his ancient mind. The humans were not just defending their world. They were declaring war on the entire hegemony. And after what he had just witnessed, he was no longer certain that the hegemony could win such a war. Fleet Admiral Thekvan had been confident when he received Admiral Vextal's distress signal. A primitive species had somehow managed to resist the initial conquest fleet, but that was nothing new. Some worlds fought harder than others. The solution was always the same: bring more ships and crush the resistance completely. But as his reinforcement fleet approached Earth's solar system, confidence began turning to concern. His long-range sensors were detecting energy patterns that made no sense. The readings suggested there were far more ships in the system than Admiral Vextal had reported. and they were moving in patterns that defied everything Fleet Admiral Thekvon knew about space combat. "Sir," his sensor officer reported nervously, "I am reading massive fleet movements throughout the system. The number of contacts keeps changing as if ships are appearing and disappearing at will." "Show me," Fleet Admiral Thekvon ordered. The main display lit up with a tactical view of Earth's solar system. What he saw there made his twin hearts skip beats. The system was filled with ships, not hundreds as Admiral Vextall had reported, but thousands. They moved in groups that split apart and reformed like living things, following no tactical doctrine that any hegemony admiral had ever seen. "How many ships are we detecting?" he asked quietly. "Sir, the count keeps changing. Our computers estimate between 8 and 12,000 active vessels, but the sensor ghosts and interference make an accurate count impossible." Fleet Admiral Thekvon felt cold fear creeping into his mind. 12,000 ships? No primitive species possessed that kind of military force. Even most hegemony member worlds had smaller fleets than that. "Signal Admiral Vextall," he ordered. "Request immediate status report." The communications officer worked at his console for several minutes before looking up with confusion. "Sir, Admiral Vextall's flagship is not responding. In fact, I cannot reach any ships in his fleet." "What do you mean you cannot reach them?" "Their communication systems appear to be completely offline, sir. I am detecting their life support and emergency beacons, but all primary systems are non-functional." Fleet Admiral Thekvon stared at the tactical display with growing horror. Admiral Vextall's entire fleet had been neutralized without being destroyed. Their ships were still there, but they were helpless. How was that possible? His question was answered when space around his own fleet suddenly came alive with human vessels. Captain Santos watched the alien reinforcement fleet from the bridge of her stealth ship, Shadow Hunter. For the past 6 hours, she and 49 other deep space vessels had been tracking the hegemony fleet as it approached Earth. They had used micro-jump drives to stay ahead of the alien sensors, always positioning themselves where the enemy would least expect them. "All Shadow units report ready," her tactical officer announced. "The aliens have entered the trap zone." Captain Santos smiled coldly. The hegemony fleet was arranged in a standard approach formation, with their largest ships in the center and smaller vessels providing escort coverage. It was exactly the formation human tacticians had predicted they would use. "Signal Admiral Reyes," she ordered. "Tell him the second act is about to begin." The human attack began differently this time. Instead of swarming the alien fleet with thousands of small ships, the Black Armada revealed its true technological advantage. Ships began appearing throughout the hegemony formation, using jump technology that the aliens had thought was impossible. Fleet Admiral Thekvon watched in disbelief as human vessels materialized inside his defensive formations. Not near them, not around them, but actually inside the protective zones where his own ships should have been safe from attack. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "All ships scatter." But it was too late. The human ships had appeared with perfect precision, each one positioned to attack the most vulnerable points of multiple alien vessels simultaneously. In the first 30 seconds of combat, over 100 hegemony ships found their engines disabled and their weapon systems offline. "Sir," his tactical officer called out in panic, "they are not trying to destroy us. They are targeting specific systems." Fleet Admiral Thekvon realized with growing terror what the humans were doing. They were not fighting to kill. They were fighting to capture. Every human attack was precisely designed to disable alien ships without harming their crews. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would they want to take prisoners?" His answer came when Admiral Reyes' voice filled the communication channels of every ship in his fleet. "Fleet Admiral Thekvon," the human said in a calm, professional tone. "Welcome to Earth's solar system. I believe you came here to reinforce Admiral Vextall's conquest fleet. Unfortunately, that fleet no longer exists as a fighting force." "Impossible," Fleet Admiral Thekvon replied. "The hegemony cannot be defeated by primitives. Admiral, look around you." Admiral Reyes said quietly. "Half your ships are already disabled. The other half are surrounded by forces you cannot see on your sensors. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. But more importantly, you are outthought." Fleet Admiral Thekvon checked his tactical displays. The human was right. His fleet was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to anticipate his every move. Every time he tried to regroup his forces, human ships appeared exactly where they needed to be to disrupt his plans. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to listen very carefully," Admiral Reyes replied, "because what I am about to tell you will determine whether your empire survives the next few years." On Luna Base, Admiral Reyes stood before a massive holographic display showing the positions of human and alien fleets throughout the solar system. Around him, his staff monitored the systematic dismantling of the hegemony forces with professional satisfaction. "Phase 4 is ready for implementation," reported Colonel Stevens. "All deep space assets are in position." Admiral Reyes nodded. Phase 4 was the part of the plan that would change everything. For 30 years, humanity had been preparing not just to defend Earth, but to take the war to the enemy. The Black Armada had ships and crews positioned throughout nearby star systems, ready to strike at hegemony worlds the moment the order was given. "Fleet Admiral Thekvan," Admiral Reyes said into his communication system, "you and Admiral Vexthul made a crucial mistake when you came to our system. You assumed that Earth was an isolated world with no allies and no reach beyond our own solar system. Your world is isolated," Fleet Admiral Thekvan replied, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "Is it?" Admiral Reyes asked. "Computer, display Tactical Overview Zeta 7. The holographic display changed to show a three-dimensional map of local space, extending out 50 light-years from Earth. Red dots marked hegemony-controlled worlds and fleets. Blue dots marked human assets. There were a lot of blue dots. For 15 years, Admiral Reyes explained, human ships have been exploring this region of space. We have established monitoring stations, supply bases, and strike forces throughout what you consider to be your territory. We know the location of every hegemony world within 50 light-years of Earth. We know their defenses, their populations, their strategic importance." Fleet Admiral Thekvan stared at his own tactical display, which was now showing some of the same information. Human ships were appearing on his sensors throughout local space, ships that had been hidden until this moment. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our sensors would have detected any intrusion into hegemony space." Admiral Reyes said with what sounded like amusement, "Our stealth technology is based on improved versions of your own designs. We have been watching you for decades while remaining completely invisible." Captain Liu commanded one of the deep space strike forces that had been revealed to the hegemony fleet. Her task force of 20 ships had been orbiting the hegemony world of Kelthar for over a year, studying the planet's defenses and preparing for this moment. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer announced. "Orbital defense platforms have been targeted. Primary military installations have been marked for precision strikes." Captain Liu looked at the peaceful alien world below, her ships. Kelthar was home to over 3 billion beings, most of them civilians who had no part in their government's decision to threaten Earth. The human plan called for surgical strikes that would the planet's ability to support military operations without harming innocent people. "Begin Phase 4 Alpha," she ordered. "Target military installations only. Avoid all civilian areas." Around the planet Kelthar, 20 human ships began their attack. But this was unlike any military assault in galactic history. Instead of bombarding cities or destroying infrastructure, the human ships used precisely targeted weapons to disable military bases, communication centers, and spaceports. Within 2 hours, Kelthar's ability to support hegemony military operations had been completely eliminated, but not a single civilian had been harmed. Similar attacks were taking place on dozens of other hegemony worlds throughout the region. Human strike forces that had been hidden for years suddenly revealed themselves, striking with surgical precision at military targets while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. Fleet Admiral Thekvan received reports of these attacks with growing disbelief. "They are attacking our worlds," he said to Admiral Reyes. "This means war." "No, Admiral," Admiral Reyes replied calmly. "War is what your empire declared when you came to our system and demanded our surrender. What we are doing now is simply showing you the consequences of that declaration. The hegemony will respond to these attacks," Fleet Admiral Thekvan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Our fleets will crush your forces." "With what fleets?" Admiral Reyes asked. "Admiral, in the past 8 hours, the Black Armada has disabled or captured over 8,000 hegemony vessels. Your local military forces have been eliminated. Your communication networks have been disrupted. Your supply lines have been cut. Fleet Admiral Thekvan checked his long-range communications array. Admiral Reyes was right. He could not reach Hegemony High Command. His emergency signals were being blocked by some kind of interference that his technicians could not identify or overcome. But this is not just about military tactics, Admiral Reyes continued. This is about showing your empire something it has never seen before. For 10,000 years, the hegemony has been the hunter. Today, you become the prey. Dr. Mitchell monitored the psychological warfare aspects of the operation from her command center on Earth. The human attacks were designed not just to disable hegemony forces, but to create a specific emotional response among alien leadership. Fear levels among captured hegemony personnel are rising exactly as predicted, she reported to Admiral Reyes. They have never encountered an enemy that could track their movements, predict their tactics, and strike at will across such vast distances. Excellent, Admiral Reyes replied. Begin Phase 4 Beta. Phase 4 Beta was the cruelest part of the human plan. Human ships throughout hegemony space began broadcasting the same message on all frequencies. The message was simple, but its implications were terrifying for any hegemony leader who understood what it meant. Attention hegemony forces, the broadcast began. This is the Earth Defense Force. For 10,000 years, your empire has conquered worlds by offering species a choice: surrender or die. Today, we offer your empire the same choice. You have seen what happens when you threaten our world. Your fleets have been disabled. Your worlds have been neutralized. Your communication networks have been disrupted. This is not an act of conquest. This is a demonstration. We do not want your empire. We do not want to rule your worlds, but we will not tolerate threats to our independence. Any future attempt to conquer Earth will result in the complete destruction of hegemony military forces throughout this region of space. You have 48 hours to withdraw all military forces from within 100 light-years of Earth. After that deadline, any hegemony warship found in our territory will be considered an act of war and will be destroyed. The age of easy conquest is over. The galaxy has changed. Adapt or be swept aside. Fleet Admiral Thekvan listened to this message with growing despair. In less than 12 hours, everything he had believed about galactic power had been turned upside down. The hegemony's vast fleets meant nothing against an enemy that could appear anywhere at will. Their advanced technology was useless against opponents who had studied it for decades and improved upon it. Admiral Reyes, he said finally, what do you want from us? I want you to return to hegemony space, Admiral Reyes replied. I want you to tell your high command exactly what happened here. I want them to understand that Earth is not a primitive world that can be conquered with threats and overwhelming force. And if they do not listen? Admiral Reyes was quiet for a long moment before answering. When he spoke again, his voice carried a coldness that made Fleet Admiral Thekvan's blood freeze. Then they will learn that humanity is very good at hunting, Admiral, and we have just identified our next prey. The tactical display changed to show the locations of major hegemony worlds throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of red dots marked planets that contained billions of alien civilians and represented the heart of the empire that had ruled space for 10 millennia. The Black Armada is not just a defensive force, Admiral Reyes said quietly. We are the sword that Earth will use to cut the chains of tyranny from every world your empire has conquered. The choice is yours, Admiral, peace or war, coexistence or conquest. But choose carefully, because if you choose war, you will discover that humanity has been preparing for much more than just defending our homeworld. Fleet Admiral Thekvan looked at his disabled fleet, thought about the reports of attacks throughout hegemony space, and realized with terrible clarity that the galaxy had just changed forever. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had become the predators. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy was a very different place. The hegemony of Zeth Kai, an empire that had ruled over 600 worlds for 10,000 years, was collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. High Commander Zethnal stood in the empty council chamber on the hegemony capital world of Vorthak, staring at the holographic display that showed the current state of their empire. Where once there had been 600 green dots representing loyal worlds, now there were fewer than 50. The rest had declared independence, formed their own governments, or simply stopped responding to hegemony authority. "How many fleets do we still control?" he asked his aide, though he dreaded the answer. 17 battle groups remain under central command," came the nervous reply. "The rest have either been destroyed by human forces or have declared loyalty to local governments." High Commander Zethnal touched the scar on his forehead, a mark he had earned in the last real war the hegemony had fought over a century ago. Back then, they had been invincible. Their technology was superior, their tactics were proven, their will was unbreakable. How had it all gone so wrong so quickly? The answer came in the form of a communication from one of their few remaining loyal worlds. The message was brief and terrifying in its simplicity. "High Command, this is Governor Kelmuth of the Drexdale system. Human ships have appeared in our space. They are broadcasting the same message they have sent to every other system. Declare independence or face the consequences. The humans are not attacking our world. They are offering to help us establish our own government. Sir, what are your orders?" High Commander Zethnal closed his eyes. This was how it had been happening across the galaxy. Human ships would appear in hegemony space, but instead of conquering worlds, they offered liberation. Instead of demanding surrender, they provided technology and assistance to help conquered species establish their own governments. It was completely insane, and it was working perfectly. Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of the EDFS Liberation, humanity's newest and most advanced ship. Through the viewports, he could see the planet Kalara III, a world that had been under hegemony rule for over 2,000 years. Yesterday, it had been a subject world forced to provide resources and soldiers to an empire that cared nothing for its people. Today, it was celebrating its first day of freedom in 2 millennia. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a message from the planetary government. They want to thank us for our assistance and ask if we plan to establish a permanent base in their system." Admiral Reyes smiled. This was the question every newly liberated world asked, and his answer was always the same. "Tell them that Earth has no interest in ruling other worlds," he said. "We came here to break chains, not forge new ones. If they want our friendship, they have it. If they need our help defending their independence, they can ask for it. But their world belongs to them, not to us." The communications officer nodded and transmitted the message. Admiral Reyes had given similar responses to over 300 worlds in the past 6 months. The Black Armada had become something unique in galactic history, a military force that conquered for the purpose of setting free. Dr. Mitchell approached Admiral Reyes with a datapad in her hand. As the architect of humanity's psychological warfare strategy, she had been monitoring the effects of their liberation campaign across the galaxy. "Admiral, the latest reports are remarkable," she said, unable to hide her excitement. "The hegemony's authority has collapsed in over 90% of their former territory. More importantly, the liberated worlds are not fighting among themselves. They are forming cooperative alliances and mutual defense agreements." "Any sign of new empires trying to fill the power vacuum?" Admiral Reyes asked. "A few attempts, but nothing serious. It appears that after 10,000 years of imperial rule, most species are very suspicious of anyone who claims they want to rule over others." Admiral Reyes nodded with satisfaction. This had been the most important part of humanity's plan. It was not enough to destroy the hegemony. They had to make sure that something better took its place. On Earth, President Martinez stood before the United Nations General Assembly, addressing not just the people of his own world, but representatives from over 200 newly independent worlds that had requested membership in what was being called the Galactic Cooperative. 6 months ago, he began, humanity faced a choice between freedom and slavery. We chose freedom, and we chose to fight for it. Today, I stand before you to announce that the age of galactic empires is over. The assembly hall erupted in cheers, from delegates representing dozens of different species. For many of them, this was the first time in their species' history that they had been free to choose their own destiny. But freedom is not just the absence of tyranny, President Martinez continued. Freedom is the right to choose your own path, to make your own mistakes, to grow and learn and become whatever you are capable of becoming. The Galactic Cooperative is not a new empire. It is not a new form of control. It is simply an agreement between free peoples to help each other stay free. Captain Santos sat in her quarters aboard the Shadow Hunter, reading reports from human ships stationed throughout the galaxy. Her vessel was currently orbiting Vorthak, the former capital of the Hegemony Empire. Below, the alien government was in complete chaos, as different factions argued about whether to surrender, flee, or make one last desperate attack on Earth. "Captain!" Her tactical officer's voice came through the ship's communication system. "We are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. High Commander Zethnal wants to speak with you personally." Captain Santos sighed. She had been expecting this call for weeks. "Put him through." The holographic image of High Commander Zethnal appeared in her quarters. The alien leader looked older than he had 6 months ago, with new lines of stress and defeat carved into his face. "Captain Santos," he said formally, "I wish to discuss terms of surrender. I am not authorized to accept the surrender of the hegemony government." Captain Santos replied, "But I can arrange for you to speak with Admiral Reyes." "No," High Commander Zethnal said quietly. "Not the government. Me. Personally, I want to surrender myself to human authority." Captain Santos was surprised. "Why?" "Because I want to understand," the alien leader said with obvious pain in his voice. "I need to understand how we could have been so wrong about everything. We thought we were bringing order to the galaxy. We thought we were civilizing primitive species. We thought we were making the universe a better place. Maybe you thought you were," Captain Santos said gently. "But thinking you know what is best for other people is not the same as actually knowing what is best for them." High Commander Zethnal was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "How do you do it?" he asked. "Do what? How do you resist the temptation to rule? You have the most powerful military force in the galaxy. You could conquer any world you choose. You could demand tribute, require obedience, force entire species to serve your will. How do you give up that power?" Captain Santos smiled sadly. "Because power that is taken by force is not really power at all. It is just fear wearing a crown. Real power comes from people choosing to work together because they want to, not because they have to." 1 year after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Vexthul stood in a small apartment on Luna Base, looking out at the Earth through a large window. He was no longer a prisoner, though he was not exactly free either. Humanity had offered him and the other captured hegemony officers a choice: return to what remained of their empire, or stay and help build something better. He had chosen to stay. "Admiral," Dr. Mitchell said as she entered the room, "the Galactic Cooperative Council is ready for your testimony." Admiral Vexthul nodded. For the past year, he had been working with human researchers to document the history of the hegemony empire. His testimony would become part of the historical record that would help future generations understand how an empire could rule for 10,000 years, and then collapse in less than 6 months. "Dr. Mitchell," he said as they walked toward the council chamber, "may I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why did humans develop such advanced military technology, but choose to use it for liberation instead of conquest?" Dr. Mitchell thought for a moment before answering. "Because we learned early in our history that the strongest predator is not necessarily the one that survives. The species that survive are the ones that learn to cooperate, to adapt, to work together for mutual benefit. But humans fight wars among yourselves constantly." "Yes, we do," Dr. Mitchell admitted. "But we also help each other. We also choose to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We also believe that the universe is a better place when everyone is free to choose their own destiny." Admiral Vexthul entered the council chamber and took his place at the witness table. Representatives from over 400 worlds filled the amphitheater, all of them eager to hear the story of how the hegemony had been defeated. "Honorable delegates," Admiral Vexthul began, "I stand before you as the former commander of the fleet that came to conquer Earth. I am here to tell you how that mission became the beginning of the end for the greatest empire in galactic history." He looked around the room at the faces of beings from dozens of different species, all of them now free to govern themselves, all of them working together to build a galaxy where freedom was more important than power. "The hegemony failed because we made one crucial mistake," he continued. "We believed that strength comes from the ability to control others. Humanity showed us that real strength comes from the ability to set others free. We came to Earth expecting to find a primitive species that would surrender quickly, or die fighting hopelessly. Instead, we found predators more dangerous than ourselves, not because they were more violent, but because they were more intelligent. They understood something we had forgotten after 10,000 years of easy victories. Admiral Vexthul paused, remembering that day when human ships had first appeared around his fleet like ghosts, materializing from the darkness of space. They understood that the most dangerous enemy is not the one with the biggest weapons or the largest fleet. The most dangerous enemy is the one that refuses to accept defeat, refuses to surrender their freedom, and refuses to let others choose surrender for them. In the audience, Captain Lu listened to Admiral Vexthul's testimony with professional interest. Her ship, the Star Hunter, was scheduled to depart for the Outer Rim territories in a few days. There were reports of a new species that was trying to build an empire based on the old hegemony model. The Galactic Cooperative had voted to send a message to these potential conquerors. The message would be delivered by the Black Armada. Admiral Vexthul, one of the delegates asked, "What do you think the future holds for this galaxy?" The former hegemony commander looked thoughtful. "I think the future belongs to those who understand that the universe is vast enough for everyone to be free. The age of empires is over, not because humanity destroyed them, but because humanity showed us a better way." "And what way is that?" Admiral Vexthul smiled, something he had learned to do during his time among humans. "The way of the pack. Humanity taught us that the strongest hunters are not the ones who hunt alone. The strongest hunters are the ones who hunt together, who protect each other, who share their victories with the entire pack." He gestured to the assembled delegates. "Look around this chamber. 400 worlds, dozens of species, thousands of different cultures and beliefs, but all working together because they choose to, not because they are forced to. This is what humanity built from the ashes of our empire. Not another empire, but a family. The hegemony ruled through fear. Humanity leads through example. That is why they will succeed where we failed." 5 years after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy had stabilized into something that would have been unimaginable during the days of the hegemony. Over 800 independent worlds had joined the Galactic Cooperative, creating a loose confederation based on mutual aid and shared defense, rather than central authority. Admiral Reyes, now retired from active military service, stood in his garden on Earth, watching his grandchildren play among the flowers. In the distance, he could see ships from a dozen different worlds landing at the spaceport, bringing trade goods, cultural exchanges, and visitors from across the galaxy. His peace was interrupted by a communication from the current head of Earth's defense forces. "Admiral Reyes," the young officer said, "we have received a distress call from the Andromeda Galaxy. A species there is asking for help against what appears to be another galactic empire." Admiral Reyes smiled. "And what did you tell them?" "That the Black Armada will be honored to assist them in their fight for freedom, sir." Admiral Reyes nodded with satisfaction. The galaxy had learned that freedom was worth fighting for. Now it was time to teach that lesson to the rest of the universe. The age of empires was indeed over. The age of cooperation had begun, and humanity, the species that had refused to kneel when ordered to surrender, would make sure that no one would ever have to kneel again.